Hello, all, and welcome to Murder at the Round Table. My name is Raf.
I'm Ibsha.
Stoked to have you all here. So, first off, how are we doing? How's life?
Life's been good.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want a weather update?
Yeah, sure. Let's do a weather update.
So, a fun story. So, on Friday, there was a tornado warning.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was coming on the train to the bus station and it got very gray. I got out, there was like rumbling of thunder, and there was like these huge like splatters of rain, but that's it. Like nothing more. However, there was a tornado warning. It was Friday, and there's this restaurant on literally the far east side of the city that has this dish that they only serve on Fridays.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to have it. I've been wanting to have it for like weeks now. And I'm like, it's today or never. So, me and my dad, also happy Father's Day.
Oh, yeah. Right, right,
Me and my
right.
dad, we actually drove. It was like a half an hour drive in like that very dark gray weather, or sorry, atmosphere with the tornado warnings. We were listening to the radio and we were getting like warnings and stuff. It was still not that huge of a deal, but so we drove, we got the food, and as we're driving back, it cleared up.
Mm,
And that was like a span of like 45 minutes of us driving there, me getting the food, and then me coming out and heading back. That was like 45 minutes. And then the radio station that we were listening to said that the tornado warning was lifted. So, yeah, that is a weather update for our listeners. And I think in one of the episodes, actually, we said that Mother Nature was being very bipolar, probably going through a breakup. That hasn't changed. The weather is warmer, and we don't wear like big jackets and fleece pants, but it's either raining or it's hecking windy or it's really hot.
So actually, a funny thing on that, I remember Friday night, a group of our friends, got together for dinner, and we all got into an argument about this specific tornado warning because only some of us were warned about it. So normally you get a notification on your phone that says like, oh yeah, there's a tornado warning, duck for cover, whatever. And not all of us got it. And it was just like, yo, what if there actually was? Half of us would be screwed.
Right.
And then we started talking about like who's your
Yeah.
cell phone provider? Or like, well, why aren't they like sending out all these details and stuff? And
Right. I think I don't know like how it works because when our province, well, like when half of Canada or majority of Canada actually had the forest fires,
yeah.
I think the first alert goes to the people that are within the region. And I think with the tornado warnings, it's the same thing. But if you have like the way your service provider, satellite or whatever that picks up the location, if you have that setting off, I think that's the issue.
Oh,
I think, I'm not sure. Because, well, that would make sense. Because if it
yeah.
can't pick up where you are, then there's no way you're getting that alert. I mean, I joined this group of friends later that night, but I'm sure you guys weren't so in a wild part of the city where you wouldn't get satellite. However, I realized recently in the city that service has been very spotty. In areas where I'd get service super easily, I can no longer get service there. So I'm not
Hmm.
sure what's happening. Maybe that was the issue, that some of the phones weren't getting service at that point.
They were in the same place though. That's the thing. Like for example, there were three people that like we had met up with, and two of them got the notification, and they were all like in the same
Mm-hmm.
spot during the day.
Yeah.
And then one of them didn't, and then I know like myself I didn't, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. But
Cool.
anyways, it is what it is.
Ready to get yeeted by the tornado.
uh,
Well, like sometimes,
yeah.
I don't want to delay this, but like I was gonna say, like sometimes me and my sister will be sitting in the same area in a parking lot. I have service and she doesn't, or vice versa.
Oh, yeah, true, true.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying like the service and how we get service is a little bit spotty.
Hmm.
But again, I think it's also to do with whether that person has location off or on. But I didn't. I was one of those people that didn't get a warning.
Okay, I see.
I just assumed based off of like how gray it got where I was. I was like, there's definitely a tornado warning going on or something. There has to be.
Which I still find as one of the funniest things because we live in a place that gets a lot of tornado warnings. But when I moved for uni, I went to like another city in the country, and there they actually get tornadoes. Like they actually land.
Oh, shit.
And I just found it funny because this isn't a place that's in the like the mid, it's not like in the prairies, right?
Right.
Alrighty, so pre-segment wise, no, this is never the pre-segment. There's like us catching up, and then there's a pre-segment.
Oh, that wasn't the pre-segment.
Two different things. But the pre-segment for me is pretty short anyways today. So I wanted to bring up this book called Love Life
Okay.
by Matthew Hussey, and it's a really, really good book. Now, I'm not putting this as like an endorsement. We're not being paid for this. Nothing on that front. It's just like I really, really like this book.
Fair enough.
Basically, it covers how to date intentionally, all like the red flags you people experience, all the stuff that kind of like happens that a little bit of like what you cause, what to watch out for. But I find that it puts a lot more focus and control on yourself, and kind of reminding you like, hey, you have the ability to go and look for what you feel worthy of and what you want. Just remember, be intentional about it.
Nice.
And yeah, so halfway through. And yeah, it's been good. I've recently become a bit of an avid reader, if I do say so myself.
I only read thrillers. I think it was one year that I read up to maybe like 20-30 books of like thrillers and murder mysteries. So I want to go back on that. It's just the time, Raph. Never happens.
Yeah, well, I guess in a way you kind of are now, like with the podcast, because like if I'm running an episode, it's like you're listening to an audiobook essentially, except one you can interact with, right?
Yeah, that's true. I'm reading like 10 books at once, so I might throw a couple of names up in on our Insta, but honestly for me, anything by Ruth Weir is like a go-to. That's gonna be a really good book.
Okay. So, the last episode I did was on the Saint Valentine's Day murder. And I kind of mentioned that, like, I was curious to pursue kind of like the gang mafia related crimes. And so I took a bit of a dive into that world, and this is going to turn into a few episodes. I really hope nobody comes after me. I'm going to try and avoid anything more recent.
No, you're good. You're good.
But yeah, so everything is very like intricate, very interconnected. And one, I was looking for, some more details, something to cover, came across a few things. But one that was like actually related to somewhere I'd been recently.
Ooh.
So last time I'd mentioned that I'd gone like kind of gallivanting around the world, and specifically I'd been to Vegas. And I got an opportunity to stay at the Flamingo Hotel, which is
I
this.
think I know where this is going. I'm excited. Go ahead.
Yeah. What is this crazy massive hotel? There's a lot of history attached to it, and it's kind of like a hallmark of Vegas. Like anytime you search up Vegas, it's the hotel that comes up. Like yeah, there's other stuff, but it's always shown there. It's just because of its like intricate history with the city. Now, imagine my surprise when I was looking into more like the mafia side of things and finding something to cover, and then that came up, and I was like, oh, all right. And side note here, in general, anything that has to do with the mafia and just mobsters in general is like such a tangled web of like intricate relationships and drama. Like the level of love, betrayal, and just crime.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me why like, media is so captivated with that. And so anyways, going back, so yeah, imagine my surprise when I came across one of the reasons why the hotel is so big is because of the mafia, specifically one individual by the name of Siegel, or as he is also known as Bugsy. And side note, I think we are slowly becoming crime historians. I didn't know that was actually like a job. But like the more we look into this stuff, it's kind of feeling like we're slowly becoming it.
History and culture and all that fun stuff is such a huge part of crime.
Yeah.
We just don't realize it.
Like it's shaped by that, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so this episode we're gonna look at his life.
Right.
Now, in terms of the hotel, that's more kind of related to his death.
Mm-hmm.
But just to paint a picture of him, we're gonna do like a bit on his early life, his main timeline as a mobster, and then, kind of final days, where I guess the more relevant crime takes place, even though just he just did a lot of crime in general.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, so trigger warning today is pretty standard, just murder and violence, just like last time.
Okay.
I feel weird that that is just like a standard trigger warning.
That it's fair. It's fair.
So, starting off, our story mainly takes place within Prohibition, but towards like the tail end of that. And it's timeline wise, it's kind of a little bit before well, actually, no, a while before the St. Valentine's Day massacre, and then
Okay.
just a little bit after that is kind of where the story's taken. So, if we start off with looking at kind of his early life and initial involvement with the mob, so we start off with February 28th, 1906, where we have Benjamin Siegel, later known by the alias Bugsy, was born in Williamsburg, which is a neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. Man's preferred to be called Ben or Mr. Siegel, but Bugsy was the more popular alias for reasons which we'll cover later. He was born as the second of 5 children of an Ashkenazi Jewish family that immigrated to the US from the Galicia region in Austria-Hungary. They weren't really that well off, which kind of motivated a lot of his life.
Mm-hmm.
So as a youth, Siegel left school and began engaging in criminal activity. Remember, kids, stay in school unless you're considering college and university. In that case, just think about that one critically because it's insanely expensive, and don't get me started. Anyways, yeah, so he left school and began engaging, in criminal activity, such as joining a gang in the Lower East Side of Manhattan and just like general stealing.
Mm-hmm.
Then he met Mo Sedway and graduated to developing a protection racket where he threatened to incinerate pushcart owners' merchandise unless they paid him $1. So for those who don't know, and that this was me included, a protection racket is like a type of organized crime where a criminal group offers protection outside of the law for subscription, essentially. Like imagine Spotify, but the service is protection, and that's illegal. And you're just being hounded for money. But yeah, pretty much that's it. The first subscriptions. Anyways, he soon built up a criminal record dating from his teenage years that included armed robbery, rape, and murder.
Mm-hmm.
When we enter his teenage years, this is where Siegel befriends Meyer Lansky and takes part in a mob slash gang that's focused on gambling and car thefts.
Yeah.
Now, Lansky is a whole story in of himself, but he had already had an interaction with Charles Lucky Luciano, which is another person who's a whole story in of himself.
Nice.
But Luciano is interesting because he is known as the father of modern organized crime and was a very pivotal force in terms of like kind of bringing to order the like
Mm-hmm.
five families or mafia families in New York. So he is a very big name, and a whole episode needs to be done for him to.
Coming soon to a podcast near you.
Yeah, pretty much. So anyways, this interaction with Luciano convinces Lansky that the Jewish boys needed something like the Italians and the Irish in their Brooklyn neighborhood. And so the first person he recruited was Siegel and his brother Jake. And so together with a few other people, actually, no, before we get there. So
Mm-hmm.
Lansky and Siegel had obviously a very long relationship and a very close one as children, and that kind of changed later, and it's really interesting, I guess, how life shapes up. Yeah, so the two of them and a few other people formed a new mob called the Bugs and Meyer mob, which covered quite a bit in their teenage and like youth lives, I guess. Starting off with bootlegging in the East Coast. Do you remember what bootlegging was?
No. Please explain.
So, bootlegging was the illegal movement of alcohol in the
Mm-hmm.
States during Prohibition. And side note, actually, there will be a few side notes now that I came across this.
Mm-hmm.
So, the side note here is that Canada had its own version of Prohibition, which I didn't know about. It was the Canada Temperance Act, called the Scott Act of 1878, which gave local governments the option to ban the sale of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So, local being like the provincial and territorial governments. So, we had prohibition provincially starting in PEI, or sorry, Prince Edward Island for you non Canadians, in 1901.
Yeah.
And then it became law in the remaining provinces, as well as the Yukon and Newfoundland during the First World War. Now, the interesting thing was that legally, liquor could still be produced and you could still ship it out of Canada, but you just couldn't sell it here. And then most of these provincial laws were repealed in the 1920s, which is very interesting because that's when prohibition started in the States.
That is interesting.
And then, PI was like the last to kind of give up the experiment, as it were, in like 1948. So we did have our own version of it. It's just didn't last too long.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as part of this time with this new mob, he became a trusted member because he responded really well to danger, and there was a lot of danger when it came to bootlegging, and he saved gang members' lives. So, really establishing himself as like,
Mm-hmm. Nice.
trustworthy to the gang, trustworthy to the cause, and such. He also acted as the mob hitman,
Really?
and he was hired out by Lansky to other crime families. Now, this grew to handling like various hits almost a decade before Murder Inc. Fam, we need to do Murder Inc. as well. We need an episode on that. So, have you heard of it before?
Briefly, I've heard of it. I haven't got too deep in it, so and I was gonna Google it right now just to like get my bases covered, but I think I'll wait because sounds like you might want to cover that.
Yeah,
Okay.
because actually, so Lansky, Siegel, Luciano are all involved in this organization called, it was like the National Crime Syndicate, also sometimes known as the Commission, and then an arm of
Mm-hmm.
that was Murder Inc. So this was kind of like a pre-organization, like the baby version of it, essentially, that they had started. So yeah, and yeah, it's an organization, and again, not to be confused with the record label, because there's a record label with like a very, very similar name, or if not, I think actually the exact same name. And yeah, I'll talk about them a little bit later on.
Mm-hmm.
During this time, he also got into the opium drug trade. Another note is that during his young life, he also developed a friendship with Al Capone, and this extended later on. At one point,
Yes.
providing a kind of safe place for Al Capone to like hide out with like an aunt of his, whatever, when there was a warrant for his arrest. And
Mm-hmm.
we have friends that we've been connected to since like we were kids. And I think about this and I'm like, how are we gonna
Mm-hmm.
be like helping each other out when we're later in our 30s and 40s? And there's not really anyone doing crime as far as I know, allegedly.
Allegedly.
So I don't think it'll be necessarily that exciting, but
But then you saying it puts it out in the universe.
maybe, or maybe by saying it, I'm like jinxing it not to happen. But I don't know. Who
I
knows?
feel like we need to make a plan B in case someone has an arrest warrant.
Yeah, they'll be like hiding out in like all these various safe houses we've set up for the group.
We should get on that.
Yeah, anyone who's listening in, you just relax. We're not actually doing that, or are we? Who knows?
We'll figure it out.
Anyways, so by 21, after getting involved with all these different aspects, I guess, bootlegging, drugs, and all that stuff, Mans was making bank, dough, moolah, whatever the heck you want to call it, and living large in the New York City nightlife. He had an apartment at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel and home in Scarsdale, New York. For reference, I just did a search on Scarsdale homes and they look freaking insane. Like old school mansions right now going for like the low to mid millions, at least the ones that are available or for sale.
Mm-hmm.
Very classy home. And then at 23, so around January 28th, 1929, Siegel married Esta Krakauer. They had two daughters, one named Millicent and one named Barbara. It should be noted that around his early to like main mob life, so around this period, he kind of developed the name or got the name Bugsy. That's around when it's started up. Initially, it was given as a compliment to explain how, or no, not sorry, not to explain, but it was given as a compliment for how erratic and quote unquote crazy as a bed bug he was, because he would be set off by anything. He had a crazy temper, and it was a name that he hated because it reminded him of like growing up poor, and he was trying to like leave that life behind by any means necessary, which we kind of see a little bit when he leaves school and he goes into crime, and it's just like trying to make money, and now all of a sudden he's making all of this money, and then people are giving him this name that's just like tie him back to his past. So anyone who called him Bugsy to his face really did run the risk of like getting beat up severely. So now we'll jump on into the main life of a mobster. So that was just kind of like all early life stuff. And the first section is on establishing himself more. So at 23, so yeah, just like after getting married, specifically in May of 13 to 16th of 1929, we find him and Lansky being invited to attend the Atlantic City Conference representing their mob. So this was one of the earliest organized crime summits in the
Mm-hmm.
USA, held by Luciano and former Chicago South Side gang leader Johnny Torrio, and it was at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel.
Nice.
So there are no clear details on the conference, but it's assumed that they discussed how to structure the mafia crime families
Nice.
and changing how they kind of split everything up to avoid violent bootlegging wars and have better reorganization and be able to
Mm-hmm.
keep profits. And oh yeah, especially on the profits front, because there was, the risk of like prohibition being repealed because people really didn't like it, as we talked about in the last episode. So how to turn their legal business into something legal and maintain profits and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So this is pretty crucial because it meant it, well, it's, or rather it signified that they had a connection to at the time, future bosses of the Genovese crime family, which was one of the big five biggest organized crime families in New York City
Mm-hmm.
at the time. So they had some like mad connections essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I find it crazy like how organized this is. Like legit, it's like a business, and they got little branches, and then they meet up and they discuss like we discuss our meetings and schedules.
Yeah, and so this is actually kind of like the first time it like happens properly. And Luciano was really pushing for this. And in a way to kind of avoid what happened when he took power.
Mm-hmm.
So in April 15th, 1931, or I guess, yeah, kind of did it in preparation to that. So yeah, April 15th, 1931, you have four gunmen, including Siegel from the Bugs and Meyer gang, who allegedly were the four gunmen who shot Joey
Mm-hmm.
Masseria on Luciano's orders, which ended the Castellammarise War. Now, side note here, the Castellammarise War was like a very bloody
Yeah.
power struggle for control of the mafia between Joey the boss, Masteria,
Mm-hmm.
and Salvatore Maranzano in New York City from February 26th, like 1930, until like April 15th, 1931, when Joy Masseria was shot. And then additionally, in the same year, September 10th, Luciano hires four gunmen again. Allegedly, Siegel is also in that group
Mm-hmm.
to murder Salvatore Maranzano. So now you have two very big names in New York City who have been killed,
Yeah.
which leaves Luciano, who was rising, to skyrocket to the top. And essentially now he has risen to the top of the mafia, and with Lansky, they formed the National Crime Syndicate,
Mm-hmm.
which brought more order and power to the crime families in the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
This involved dividing mafia territories to prevent future gang wars like the one that Luciano was just part of.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is also where Murder Incorporated comes in. So it was established to handle hits and like kind of have controlled, directed violence for the families.
Right.
A lot of the requests that they got were honestly just like gangsters putting out hits on other gangsters. But it was at least more organized than the chaotic violence from before.
Mm-hmm.
A tad. Anyways, so after they kind of like established Murder Incorporated, Siegel and Lansky kind of moved on to other projects, but Siegel still kind of worked as a hitman now and again for them. And so now that brings us to February 20th, 1932. So Siegel is in Miami, and the only time that he actually ever gets like convicted is for like gambling and vagrancy. Literally, that's it. He just
That's it.
pays a fine. And that's about it. During that same year, though, and I bring that up because
Mm-hmm.
during the same year, he was involved in a heavy disagreement with the Fabrizio brothers,
Mm-hmm.
which led to an attempted assassination on Lansky and himself. He retaliates by killing the brothers, except for one who
Yeah.
got away and who tried to out Murder Incorporated, but the mafia found out before he could.
Mm-hmm.
So he establishes an alibi at a local hospital, sneaks out with two accomplices, pretends to be detectives, lures the Fabrizio, the last one, out of his house and guns him down. And then around 1935, he kills a rival loan shark, or yeah, loan shark brothers, Louis Pretty Amberg and Joseph C. Amberg. Some of these names, I'm like,
It belongs in the
uh,
mafia.
it's interesting.
You don't hear them elsewhere. You're never going to
Yeah.
go to the hospital and look at a name of a doctor and being like, doctor that. Never.
Which I guess kind of like makes sense because it's like a moniker for what they're known for, their style, their signature, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the Amberg brothers and killed them to help Luciano's alliance with Dutch Schultz. So, Mans gets involved in a lot of murder, obviously. He's working as a hitman and
Mm-hmm.
such. But the only conviction he ever gets is for gambling, and he pays like $100 fine, and that's it. So this brings us to our next little section, which is California. So he takes off from Miami because his alibi comes into question. The one at the hospital. And once he leaves, he kind of gets sent back and forth between California and the East Coast to assist in the development of a syndicate sanctioned gambling racket in the
Mm-hmm.
LA area with a family boss called Jack Dragna. While in LA, he takes Dragna and another gang boss, Mickey Cohen, as subordinates, and he took over the LA numbers racket and used the money from the syndicate to establish like a drug route from Mexico and like organize circuits with the Chicago outfits wire services. Now, Chicago Outfit was a mafia group based in Chicago, ran primarily by Al Capone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so during the same time, Siegel had traveled to southern Nevada with Sedway to look at expanding like operations out there. He found an opportunity in providing illicit services to crews that were constructing the Boulder Dam. Lansky then handed over operations in Nevada to Siegel. Oh, yeah, to Siegel, but he passed it over to Sedway and just left for Hollywood instead. And you know what? It's not surprising because, Mans, as we have seen so far, is really into the finer things in life. He wants the glam, the fame, the money, and all that stuff. Essentially, whatever kind of separates him from his past,
Mm-hmm.
and shows that he's kind of like made it, I guess. Or now, this is me just putting words out there in terms of like looking at the way he acts and stuff. Yeah, so like we've said before, he loves a larger than life, and he's now in Tinseltown, which is the epitome of that. Have you ever heard the term Tinseltown?
Yeah, and it's from I think BuzzFeed Unsolved when they were talking about gang crimes. So yeah, specifically like Hollywood related mafia crimes. So that's definitely where I've heard the term before.
Okay. So Tinseltown is, so in general, it was the term for Hollywood. So it was called that in the
Yeah.
1930s because of the kind of like glittering, glamorous image of the movie industry and how they were producing like 600 films or so a year.
Yeah.
But now it's kind of a more derogatory or like sarcastic name for Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, it refers to like the glamour of it, but it also refers to the superficiality
Right.
of Hollywood and what being in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
But it was perfect for him. So he bought a home in Beverly Hills. He made friends with many celebrities, including people like Clark Gable, Tony Curtis, Jean Harlow, Frank Sinatra, and even the Countess Dorothy D. Frasso, yeah. We'll go with that. So the Countess, that connection is kind of interesting because it led to quite
Mm-hmm.
the little excursion experience of going to
Nice.
Italy, meeting Mussolini, whom he tried to sell weapons to,
Damn.
and then meeting Nazis who he disliked and
Mm-hmm.
later offered to kill. And he was trying to like sell Mussolini explosives and he was given money by Mussolini to like for said explosives, but they failed to explode or like they failed to detonate during one of their first tests when he was trying to sell them. So Mussolini is like, just man, like give me my money back.
Fair enough.
And then after that, he left. He just came back to the States. And then while he was in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
he just partied a lot. But even though that was his life and everything, he was still on the clock for the syndicate. So he worked to form illegal rackets aimed at movie studios by manipulating trade unions,
Yeah.
which honestly is kind of ingenious. Side note on that, because like I did not think about using it this way. So what he would do is kind of infiltrate trade unions,
Yeah.
get them to strike, and then if the studios paid him off, he'd get the unions to work again,
Mm-hmm.
which I guess is its own form of a protection racket, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily have to be violence based,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. And then in addition, he borrowed money he never paid back from like all his like Hollywood friends and like $400,000. He's like, yeah, none of them are gonna ask. He did have a bit of a reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Around this time, he began dating actress Virginia Hill. This is covered in a movie I'll mention later.
Yeah. Two of them, right?
There might be a little like bell ringing, you know, in your head here, as I've said, like he's dating an actress, but this man's not married. He is married and has kids. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
he did have a bit of a name as being like a womanizer and kind of getting around at the
Mm-hmm.
time. So now we get to November 22nd, 1939, where we find Siegel, Whitey, Krakow, Frankie Carbo, and Albert Tannenbaum, who together kill Harry Big Greeny
Mm.
Greenberg outside his Hollywood Hills apartment. So Greenberg had threatened to become a police informant, and Buchalter ordered his killing. Was another mobster. Tannenbaum confessed to the murder and agreed to testify against Siegel. And then in September of 1941, Siegel gets implicated for the murder and put on trial. But when he was on trial and like he was, you know, in prison right after that, like waiting and stuff, he was treated like really, really well, which brought a lot of scrutiny. Like he could leave prison, go get his dental visits, and come back, and it was very posh, which everyone was like, "What? What the? Like, what's going on here?" Anyways, during this time,
Mm-hmm.
two state witnesses died, and no additional witnesses came forward, so Tannenbaum's testimony was dismissed. And then in 1942, Siegel was acquitted because, again, insufficient evidence, but his reputation was damaged, and this man's is very big on reputation and that larger than
Yeah.
life picture, and he's doing really well. So that was really damaging to him, partly because like during the trial his past kind of came out to everyone in Hollywood, and in addition they now also started calling him Bugsy, but like I mentioned before, he preferred to be called Ben or Mr. Siegel. Like he preferred to have that good reputation. um So yeah, so then 1942, his everything that he has set up is kind of running smoothly-ish. He has $500,000 a day coming from the syndicate bookmaking wire operations, which I kind of assumed was from the work he was doing in LA to kind of assist with more of the like racketeering and supporting like the drug trade and such. And then in May 25th, 1944, Siegel gets arrested for bookmaking. Raft and Mac Gray testified on his behalf, so he was acquitted again in late 1944. Mance just keeps making it out. Like a lot of people like him, and they're all ready to defend him.
Bookmaking. That's not literally making a book,
No,
is
no,
it?
it's not. And yeah, the definition is the gambling practice of determining odds and receiving and paying off bets on the outcome of sporting events, typically horse racing, political contests, other competitions. So then we get to 1946, where we have issues with Siegel and wire transfers caused the Chicago outfit to take over the Continental Press and give the percentage of the racing wire to Dragna, which pissed off Siegel. Essentially, he was having a lot of issues with like wiring money back to the outfit, so they were like, "Hey, we're gonna just put somebody else on this." And in this case, it was Dragna. However, he still controlled several like offshore casinos and like a major prostitution ring, and he also had all these influential and powerful relationships. So, like with politicians and businessmen, attorneys, accountants, lobbyists, all who fronted him and stood by him and all that. In the same year, his marriage ended, which
Aww.
kind of makes a lot of sense. Mans was known as a womanizer.
Yeah.
And so Esther moved with their daughters back to New York City. And that's literally the last time we kind of like interact with them. Yeah, I kind of only really mentioned them once when he got married and then now divorced. So this now brings us to Las Vegas. So by the end of his time in Hollywood, he had this fun life experience, this image, but it was completely torn down. So now he's like, you know what? I need to go somewhere else to reinvent myself. Where can I go? An opportunity, the up
Mm-hmm.
and comer city of Las Vegas. And yeah, so that brings us 1946. He gets the opportunity to, reinvent himself, and he wants to become a legitimate business owner. And this comes in the form of William R. Wilkerson's Flamingo Hotel. I've kind of named this section, by the way, Vegas and the Final Days. So in the mid 1940s, Siegel, now in Las Vegas, works with his lieutenants on a business policy to kind of secure all the gambling, in Los Angeles. And he had this dream. He was going to build the most attractive place to gamble with the best food and the best drink and the biggest entertainers, and everyone would come and would vacation in the spot for all the reasonable prices it had. It's just one little
Mm-hmm.
thing. In order to make his dream a reality,
Right.
he needed to be in control. So he kind of coerced slash forced Wilkeson into giving him full control of the Flamingo, which led to Wilkerson like hiding out in Paris for a while. And the Flamingo Hotel now was syndicate run,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. Now Siegel could like build his dream, this great place for everybody to come and just like take part in living life,
Yeah.
and get them high rollers. So, side note here, when I was in Vegas, I found the, I guess, social engineering really interesting
Mm-hmm.
because everywhere you went, you always end up at a slot
Right.
machine. It doesn't matter where you're going, how you're walking, all paths lead to some form of a casino, some sort of a slot, or some sort of a table.
Oh yeah.
So now, to make his dream a reality, Siegel needed a lot of money. So man starts spending. Oh, and spending he does. He wants the finest building he could get for like post Second World War. Yeah, where are we? 1946? Yeah, yeah, post Second World War-ish. And while he's trying to build this, amazing building, costs are going up, leading to bouncing checks. He is borrowing more money from the syndicate. By October 1946, the Flamingo's costs were over $4 million.
Holy smokes.
Again, this is 1946. And note by 1947, the costs were over 6 million, which is equivalent to 72 million as of 2023.
Damn.
Just going back to 1946. The interesting thing is this is kind of what led Siegel to being coined as the father of the Vegas Strip. Not necessarily because he established it, but more because he established the attitude
Mm-hmm.
that was then like kind of encouraged and like kind of inspired future casino moguls of like going for the best and having kind of the maniacal chest puffing or pride attitude over like your casino hotel, the best experience, the best of everything that now
Mm-hmm.
Vegas is kind of known for as Sin City. He tried his best to change his reputation, but he still had a violent reputation. And it strained some of his relationships, including with his head contractor, Del Webb. But he really tried. He was very charitable too, apparently, donating to the Damon Runyon Cancer Fund to kind of make himself look good.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, a dream is fantastic, dream away.
Everyone should have one.
But when you dream with other people's money,
It's a bit difficult.
yeah, that becomes a bit of a problem. So he poured so much money in that he just couldn't get around to paying the syndicate back, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a lot of problems with the outfit's wire service, even though it had kind of cleared up in Nevada and Arizona. He refused to report business, and instead he said that, you know what, in California specifically, it was like in California, because he was still kind of involved in
Mm-hmm.
stuff happening there. He's like, I'm gonna run things the way I want to run them, and y'all are gonna get paid when I'm ready to pay you. Essentially, is what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And the higher ups were okay with it, because he'd done so much good work so far, spotless record and stuff. But again, it's people's monies. So December 26, 1946, the Flamingo opens, but only the casino, lounge, theater, and restaurant were finished at the time.
Yeah.
It failed spectacularly. There were some celebrities that drove up from LA, but not many. And those that did found the construction was still taking place. Like the lobby still was being like half constructed. There was shoddy air conditioning, which, is detrimental to your comfort considering you're in a desert.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So that, in addition with the casino, which was losing money, pissed him off, kind of verbally, he became verbally abusive, throwing out like at least one family at the time. After 2 weeks, the Flamingos gaming tables were
Mm-hmm.
$275,000 in the red,
Mm-hmm.
and so the entire operation was shut down in late January 1947. Siegel really did everything he could to turn the Flamingo into a success. He made renovations, he obtained good press, he hired Hank Greenspun as a publicist, who was known at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So then by March 1st, 1947, the hotel reopened and began to turn a profit. However, it was too freaking late. The powers that be at this point had kind of gotten tired of waiting for their money and had already started taking steps. So now we come to the ill-fated June 20th, 1947. So this is where we find Siegel.
Mm-hmm.
He's chilling with his associate, Alan Smiley, in the Beverly Hills home he leased to his
Yeah.
girlfriend. He's just chilling, he's reading the LA Times. An unknown assailant fired at him through the window with a .3 caliber military M1 carbine. hit him many times, including twice in the head. So considering how weapon proficient Siegel was, honestly, this was likely the best move, but it was also seen as a cowardly approach because Mans was not really given a chance here. And no one was charged for killing Siegel. The crime remains officially unsolved still. But we kind of have hints here. So the day after Siegel's death, Las Vegas got thrown into the national spotlight because of, his involvement with the Flamingo Hotel. This gave it a lot of publicity. All publicity is good publicity, right? And then this guy, David Berman, and his Las Vegas mob associates, Sedway and Gus Greenbaum, walked into the Flamingo and took over operation of the hotel and casino. So still within control of the syndicate, just under new management. This probably remained the case until the 1970s, 80s era, where Las Vegas and specifically Nevada really zoned in on getting the mob out of the strip, out of owning casinos, out of any form of that connection. So, as you can see, dude was just living life. Though he was very violent, he was into the finer kind of things in life, kind of trying to offset the way that he grew up. Yeah, if I'm gonna make an anime reference here because, that's who I am. If anyone listening has ever watched Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, he's literally greed in that show. That's all I could think about when I was like reading up on him. Except not as nice. Actually, let me clarify that. Not as nice. Oh, so one thing I hadn't mentioned before is that since this is unsolved and it's pretty typical on this podcast, we will discuss theories. And that is the last section here, is theories on who was our killer, who called the shot, what was the reasonings. It's the fun part. Alrighty, so theories on the killers. So theory one, it was the syndicate, duh. The reasoning is excessive spending and possible theft of money from the mob. It's kind of like skimming off the top of the money that he owed them. In 1946, a meeting was held with the board of directors of the syndicate in Havana, Cuba, so that Luciano, who at the time was exiled to Sicily, could attend. A contract on Siegel's life came out of that meeting, and according to this guy, Stacher, Lansky reluctantly agreed to the decision. He was at that meeting, and they grew up together essentially. But to end up agreeing, though, even if it's reluctant, that's kind of insane considering how deep their relationship is. But yeah, plain and simple, syndicate got tired of waiting. Theory two, I gave them each of these theories my own names. Hell hath no fury like a woman's protection. So Siegel was shot to death preemptively by this guy, Matthew Moose Panza, who was the lover of Sedway's wife, B, who went to Panza after learning that Siegel was threatening to kill her husband. So Siegel apparently had grown increasingly resentful of the control Sedway had over his finances and was supposedly planning to do away with him. So that was the second theory. Theory three, it's still Lansky, y'all. So there was a former Philadelphia family boss by the name of Ralph Natal who claimed that Carbo, was the guy we mentioned earlier, was responsible for killing Siegel at the behest of Lansky. So now is this likely connected to theory one, where that it was still like the syndicate, so Lansky doing it as an extension of like the conclusion or the decision that the syndicate came to. Or maybe he was just really pissed off too, because he did vouch for this guy. He vouched for him to kind of have control over the West Coast syndicate operations, vouch for him like in terms of setting that stuff up to the syndicate and everybody else. And he's spending all this money, he's not paying anyone back, he's saying he's gonna stay in control. So like, yeah, could also see a situation where he's like, yo, you're messing up with my reputation. Now, the theory four, which is my own, is that Mans was a womanizer and just owed a lot of money. Period. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he slept with someone he shouldn't have. And in addition to that, owed money that, because like by the time he left Hollywood, he owed like what, $400,000 to like a bunch of people that he decided to just never pay back and he thought would never ask for money back. And he had a reputation of, well, sleeping around, and you know, those people were not necessarily all single. So, like, it could be a very easy case, especially considering the way he was killed. It being like an unknown assailant and just, firing into his home like that could be it too. And theory five, which is also my own, just plain flat out revenge. He has killed a lot of people, as we have seen today. I would not be surprised if somebody nursed like just a good old like grudge, and they knew exactly where he was because he was so public now. He was so public because of the trial in Hollywood and then the situation in Las Vegas and try to set up the Flamingo Hotel and all that stuff. Do I have any particular names? Not really. The list is like a mile long. So, but yeah, so those are the five theories. So three that kind of found online, and then the last two is my own. What are your thoughts?
In terms of theory, I think it had to be like someone within
Hmm.
the mafia family, whether it be for revenge, whether he slept with one of their women and then still owed like a shit ton of money. This, like we talked about in your previous episode,
Yep.
contrast to that, that was very unorganized. This feels organized, right? So if not the syndicate who had legitimate reasons to get like kill him,
Hmm.
but also like killing him means they wouldn't get the money back from him. But I mean, it's the mafia. I don't think they really have that moral code. Or I don't know.
Yeah, I agree in the sense like it's not necessarily a moral code per se, but it looks like more just like
No.
a code to allow for order and good business ish.
A deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a deal. Like
Hmm.
if I kill that one person that owes me money, well, I'm not going to get the money back. Like, yeah, I can, like, take it. Yeah, so, like, I feel like they have a legitimate reason. But because this seems so organized, again, because it is unsolved and nobody's willing to come out, it feels like it's someone who's done this before. So, owed a lot of money, valid reason, and also revenge is another. Lansky is also probable. Like, yeah, so a couple of those theories, I think they go together.
Well, specifically, I want to search up Meyer Lansky's name because, yeah, he was known as the mob's accountant, but at some point I'd seen something about him also being like nicknamed as like the intelligent
You're like, this is soft. Let me just check.
one. So like it could have been totally like a calculated move. I could see that. Like he's seeing his friend basically go off the rails and is like, yo, cut my losses, you know?
Yeah, so that is my theory. Like, it could have been a lot of things, but it was within the mafia family that was behind this, no doubt.
Hmm.
The other thing is, like, this could have been avoided. Him dying for this particular reason of owing money, if that is why he died, or was killed rather, it could have been avoided. I think, when you have a dream,
I have a dream.
there's obviously limitations. And I think he went beyond that. Dreaming big is great, but there's steps to get to that big dream. You can't really go from 1 to 100 in one night, and I think he tried to make that jump. Although for him, I think at a certain point it was a possibility, but if he started off with like, I don't know, a casino that was like a medium-sized one and he worked his way to the top, we may have not had the flamingo as it is today, but
And how big it is. Yeah.
yeah, it would have been something totally different. But, I don't think it would have costed his life. Again, assuming he died because of that reason.
Because of the amount that he owed. Like,
I'm no way like being like, hey, this is really bad that he died. Like, blah, blah, blah. He's dead. There's nothing I could do. But I'm saying like it could have been avoided.
Yeah. And I think even like in terms of taking the time to, yeah, again, focus exclusively on like
Mm-hmm.
making sure that the casino at least was good, that there was still revenue coming in, that he could pay back the syndicate, hold them off if that's the reason why he died. Another thought too was like maybe somebody else shared his dream and was like, hey, you know what? He actually has something going on here. Maybe we just and then we can just take over, we can run it.
The flamingo did make it big after he died. So I had a thought like what if he put the hit on himself?
Oh.
Yeah, the flamingo did make revenue and there would have been hope to pay off the money.
What if he put the hit on himself? Yo, I'm writing this one down just like to remember for next time.
It was something that popped up in my head and I kind of like stopped. I was like, well, what are the possibilities?
So wait, let's see. It was 1947. He was born 1906. This puts him at 41 years. I don't know. He really enjoyed like the, finer things life-wise, right? But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I could see it too because a lot of people liked him, supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
And there should have been enough people that if it was something that was called for internally,
Yeah.
he would have gotten a heads up. The fact that it was just like one quiet night, he's just chilling and then brat brat, you know? The fact that just like happened.
Yeah, no, it's entirely possible. It could have been, the girlfriend or the wife who was kind of being fed. I kind of wonder, like, even though they were divorced at this point, what their life was like, if they had any sort of like gossip, because like you can move away from somewhere, and given the time that this happened, maybe words on the street and rumors didn't really leave them. That is also a possibility.
Oh, so like hit called by his wife?
Yeah, we don't. Well, like, do you have information on like who his wife was, like the type of person that she was?
No, barely anything.
Yeah, so I think that one's a little bit far fetched, but you're not wrong to say that someone who had a similar dream around him who wanted to take over could potentially have put the hit. But yeah, it's definitely from within the mafia. If you want to do more research, you have to think who could have potentially been affected.
Yeah.
So, like, when you put a hit on someone and you're not able to like pay off that hit, someone's taking that hit too. But then what kind of people actually benefited from, Bugsy being gone? There's people who would benefit because a rival was gone, but also financially who did well after this point. And again, it could have been the wife, it could have been the daughters, it could have been the girlfriend. I don't know if you want to look deeper into that, but those are definitely conversations that we can have later.
You know what? I could 100% see it being Sedway.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sedway came in and was one of the guys who took over the Flamingo Hotel after he died.
Yeah.
And if you remember, Sedway was a guy that he met when he was really young. I guess I could take a look at like Sedway's life and see like, okay, what's he known for? But
Definitely, yeah, I was gonna ask.
it doesn't seem like he has much like the same level of presence. So maybe this was like a jealousy thing.
Yeah. It could have been that he was next to, well, jealousy thing, or it could be that he was the one person who would have gotten partnership to it anyways. But 100%, maybe it was someone who saw the same dream and.
Actually, yeah, listen to this. The first sentence to describe him when you Google this guy is an associate of Bugsy Siegel and a faithful lieutenant of a organized crimes, Meyer Lansky.
Mm-hmm.
So he was involved with both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then him and Gus
Right.
Greenbaum, so the ones that came in after
Yeah.
Siegel died, they're listed as making the Flamingo Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas successful
Mm-hmm.
after his death. And like literally that is it. 100% it actually could have been Sedway.
That is it. So yeah, could have been said, or like It could have been him. Yeah, definitely Lansky and him. Or it was Lansky and he was kind of like, he just stepped up. I don't know. But yeah, that makes complete sense if that's the only thing that's about him out there.
Yeah, it was probably a bit more, but it's like I could see a situation where because he was involved with the three of them essentially, well, so like with the other two,
Mm-hmm.
but like you have Lansky and Siegel going around like like being part of the creation of Murder Incorporated, the National Crime Syndicate, doing this, doing that, like being big names. And
Mm-hmm.
I no hate on this guy, but I totally forgot him until like just now at the end when he talked about who takes over the hotel, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, because they would have had to make it big.
Yeah.
But also, whoever took it over has to pay off that loan, ginormous loan, too.
So it could also been like a situation of like, the syndicate's like, hey, we need our money, and Lansky's like, fine, all right, well, I guess the hit is out on him, and Sedway's like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'll handle it. Given the opportunity to step up, Siegel dies, and then he gets the hotel, he gets to build it up, he gets the acclaim and everything of like making it successful.
The thing is
Mm.
that they would have had to known that the flamingo was going to be big after Bugsy or Siegel died. Yeah, but here's the thing. Like, if I
Mm.
open a hotel, I want to do this big thing. I'm not able to pay off the loan. And somebody makes a hit because they know potentially that they could do something better with this. They have to know that hotel has to do good in order to make that hit right. Because what if there was publicity but it wasn't good?
All publicity is good publicity.
It maybe it was good, but it didn't it like the flamingo did good for like maybe 5 years and then it shut down. Not enough money to pay off the syndicate.
Hmm.
Whoever made this hit, whether it be Lansky or the other guy,
Sedway. Yeah.
Sedway. So what's the segue? I'm like, that's not right. Sedway, they had to have known that this hit was going to be worth it.
Hmm.
So
They bought the dream.
yeah, I guess in a way it was a risk if it was them because they didn't know if it was going to be big unless.
Well, like March 1st, 1947, that's when it started, it reopened, and that's when it started turning a profit, right? So by the time Siegel died, June 20th, a few months had passed, enough time to at least see how much of a profit it was turning,
Right. Would that be enough time to decide on that hit? In my understanding, some of these hits are made well in advance.
which is true, yeah, with them meeting like back in like 1946 calling for that, yeah.
This Siegel is not like a $20 hit.
Hmm.
He's probably worth a lot. The person, whether it be Lansky or Sedway themselves or somebody in the syndicate, that hit is a lot of
Hmm.
money. And
Wait, sorry, no, they don't necessarily have to keep the hotel going.
okay,
That's the other thing to consider. If the hotel looks like it's going to do good, great, they get their money back. But if it doesn't, that's also fine because you just stop everything and you sell it,
okay,
right? That's how you could make your money back. But
fair.
highly doubtful that Siegel would have been.
Willing to sell his dream? Well, not Siegel, but I guess Lansky and Sedway would have, yeah, sold the dream. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe if it wasn't like turning enough profit, it was like it might have been a situation of like, hey, all right, he's really into this, but we can't risk this anymore. Okay, now that Sideways in is like, okay, is this actually worth it? Yes or no? He starts seeing that yes, it is worth it. All right, let's keep going and let's make it even better and better and better and continue on. But again, it could also just be a matter of like, hey, one of my closest friends from childhood just died. I want to make sure his dream grows big and goes
Goes
on
on,
and
yeah.
is the best place ever. Weep, weep, but also rake in all the dough. Weep, weep.
Yeah, if a hit was made, I think it would have been made well in advance because that's not a low hit. It's a pretty high hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that his
Siegel.
Siegel's market value at this point is quite wild. So it
Mm.
had to be advanced. And if it was by Lansky and Sedway, that was a big risk, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, no, I can see it. Okay, I think we've reached the end of deliberations. I think we're on the same page as like in terms of like who it most likely is. Yeah, we'll see if anything comes up or if like when I'm looking at the other intriguing mafia characters, if anyone gets mentioned as
Yeah.
allegedly been involved in his death. Because like just today, how many people did we talk about? We talked about Luciano, we talked about Al Capone, Lansky, Sedway, I guess, Panza, and Greenbaum, and like all these different people who have their own
Mm-hmm.
family relationships and their own monies and their own hits and their own situations. And I really, really want to do like a deep dive, especially into the mafia crime families in New York and Luciano and like him establishing like a more like organized structure and then like kind of covering what happened at least up until the 2000s, and then maybe I'll call it there because some of the families are still active.
Yeah, there's a point where you're like, yeah, let's call it there.
Yeah.
Nothing more to
I
add?
guess in terms of well, yeah, I've kind of skipped all the way to the conclusion, saying kind of what I want to look at next time. But
Of course.
one last thing to add in like closing remarks is that there's a movie called Bugsy, released in 1991, and it's about Siegel and how he leaves New York City, heads to like Hollywood, builds up the syndicate gambling rackets there, falls in love or slash gets involved with Virginia Hill, even though he has wife and kids and such. And then his obsession with making the gambling oasis in Vegas and how he kind of
Mm-hmm.
gets into some serious deep water over like
Mm-hmm.
the reckless construction and the amount of money he was spending and eventually the conclusion. Directed by Barry Levinson. I haven't seen it yet, just something I came across. But yeah, for anyone who is interested, could take a look at that movie. I will too at some point, I think. But yeah, that is it for me today.
Thank you so much, Raf. That was a really good presentation, and I am excited to, connect the dots with all these fun characters.
I literally think of like starting up like a board in my room and then just putting like everybody, like the thing I don't know what that's called, but you see in like movies all the time. You have the person's picture, you have the line connecting them to somebody else and kind of.
Yeah, the name's slipping. But regardless, we will get one started and we will update that on our Instagram page. If you don't follow it yet, please do. That's where we put our fun behind the scenes sometimes, and then any picture exhibits that might help you understand the story that we're saying a little bit better. Until then, I don't know. I don't do the outros. It's usually Raph. But enjoy our episodes. Enjoy the weather. Enjoy whatever you enjoy. And we will see you very soon on another episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.